All right, the most important thing we can do before we start our second service, is to make sure that we're standing on worship ground. So let's go ahead and take our normal few moments of silence, which is designed to give every believer both the privacy and the opportunity necessary to make those decisions to be standing on worship ground. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this opportunity to continue to study your word. We ask that God, the Holy Spirit, would provide for us everything necessary for us to function properly in that study, and we pray in Christ's name. Amen. My computer decided to reset itself here, so just give me a second. It's coming up. It was up, and then all of a sudden it went away. I had gotten in the habit of printing a backup copy, but my ink, I ran out of ink, so I couldn't do that this morning. So I'm flying totally electronically. Okay, we're ready now. We've finished verse 8, so obviously we're ready to go into verse 9. And what we're going to see in verse 9 is we're going to see the flip side now of what is the status of the unbeliever is, that stumbling, falling, bruising, smashing, disbelieving individual. And instead we're going to see what we as believers are supposed to do, and what we as believers, the status that we have. And the focus of this, as we go through, be thinking, because we'll get to this as we go through our analysis, but the idea is not only the status, in other words, the position, that's what it means when we use that term. We talk about being positionally elected, okay, for example. Not only the status of being elected, but also what that means from an experiential or from a standpoint of operating in that mode, right? You are a believer, but that doesn't mean you always operate as a believer. So that's the difference between positionally and experientially. You're a believer, okay, and when you function as a believer, then you're functioning experientially as a believer, okay? So verse 9 starts off with the phrase, but you are a chosen slant elect race, comma. R's and parents with a line through it. You are a chosen slant elect race. We start here with the post-positive conjunction, de, de. This is a conjunctive particle, and it's used commonly to denote continuation or a further thought, development. It's taking its specific sense from the context. And so sometimes it can mean and, but when used in contrast, it means but. And right now, we have it in contrast, so it's but, and it's the light form of the word but. Remember, when we have Allah, that means but, and we usually do an underline comma, okay? So this is the light form. Then we go back to the first word in the verse. This is the post-positive, meaning it comes after the very first word. De never starts the sentence, okay? We go back to the first word in the verse, which is a nominative plural of the second person personal pronoun, which you could probably put together in your sleep, which is su, S-U. And so the concept here is you all as a plural. And so Peter's talking to all of these believers, all of these individuals. And it's very clear here that in the contrast that he's doing, he's meaning you and only you. You all and only you all, not anybody else, not any of those other believers that I was just talking about. I'm talking about you and you all, okay, and only you. So that's the concept, the kind of force, actually, that you have to think about that we have here, okay? And then we have are. Are is the elliptical status quo verb. It's flagged by the fact that we have a predicate nominative, okay, without the status quo. And so the next word's going to be in the nominative. It's predicate nominative, okay? And so we have to put in the status quo. Status quo is to be. So we have is, are, be, those kinds of things. That's what status quo means. And then we have the predicate nominative. Yeah, there we have the predicate nominative, and it's compound predicate nominative, okay, that we're going to have that has several descriptions. And we're going to see 4, okay, of these things that we are. Okay, so we're going to see 4 of them. And I did hold up 4 fingers, right? I didn't do 4 like that. Sometimes my hand does something I don't think about, you know. It's like, you know, like they say, there's three types of people when it comes to math: those that can do it and those that can't. Anyway, we have anyway, we have the predicate nominative. The first we have is the neuter nominative singular of the adjective electos. E-L-E-K-T-O-S, electos. And electos means to be selected, chosen, or we transliterate it as elected. Here the idea is that we were chosen or elected. I've given you the compound translation because we were just talking in verse 8 about the divine decree and the unbelievers being in the unbeliever side of the divine decree. Now we're talking about being chosen or being elected and being in the believer side of the divine decree. Okay, we're talking about being in God's family, being placed into that believer side with all the things that are commensurate with being there. The 40 things that we talked about several weeks ago. Okay, and we have a indefinite article, so we have a chosen. Okay, then finally, in this phrase, this first description, we have a neuter nominative singular of the noun genos. G-E-N-O-S, genos. Looks like Gino's, the pizza place, but it's actually genos. And this is a noun that expresses a relationship of various degrees. It means ancestral stock or descendant, and then comes to mean family or relatives. Then is extended to mean a relatively large group of people, with emphasis on them being related. And then therefore finally comes to mean a race. Okay? It's not just a nation. See, a nation can be composed, like ours, of multiple races. The attitude here, because like I said, you're going to see a bunch of different kind of synonyms that Peter is using, and this is one of the first ones. And what he's talking about here, though, is the emphasis on those that are related. Okay? We are related to each other by being in the plan of God. We are elected. We are placed into union with Christ. We are all related. We are in that family. We are a race. Okay? We are also a race by virtue of the fact that we are now trichotomous. We're different, okay, than the unbeliever. We are a different creature, the idea of not being unequally yoked. We are not supposed to be with unbelievers. Because why? Because they're racially different than us. In fact, they're a different species, okay? But we are a race. So here we have a race. We are in union with Christ and related to him. And we have a comma in the Greek. And so we have a comma in the English. But you are a chosen elect race. And next we have a royal priesthood, comma. The second description in our compound predicate nominative. It starts with the neuter nominative singular. All of these are going to be neuter nominative singulars of the adjective. I believe they're all neuter. Yes. Neuter nominative singular of the adjective Basileus. Basilias. There we go. Basilius. I want to put the accent on the EI, but it's not that. It's Basilios. Basilios. B-A-S-I-L-E-I-O-S. Okay? And it means royal, kingly, belonging to or fit for a king. And here I translate it as royal with the indefinite article, royal. And then we have the noun that it modifies. We have the neuter nominative singular of the noun hieratuma. That's H-I-E-R-A-T-E-U-M-A. And in classical Greek, It's associated with the individual who lives in the Hierapolis, okay, which was a particular city that was associated with being priestly, okay? But here, there's a cognate of the noun hieratiah, and hieratiah means priestly office, and therefore our word means the one holding the priestly office or the priesthood, okay? And it's only in this word is actually only found in the Greek of the Bible, and it's with respect to others, okay, who are dependent on the priest. And the idea here, though, is it's a priesthood, okay? So it's the priesthood. So we have a royal priesthood, comma. Next, we have the third description, a holy nation, comma. We start off as we did before. By the way, obviously this is an ausendetic list, okay? We don't have and in front of it, and. And remember, when you have a polysyndetic, we would have had you are a chosen elect race and a royal priesthood. We would have underlined it. We would have underlined chosen elect race and a royal priesthood, underlined, and a holy nation, underlined, and the next one, okay, where each one of those are emphasized. The reason this is ausendetic is because it gives us the topic, and we're supposed to understand the topic, but it gives us the topic so that we can get to the end and get to the reason that Peter's going to give us that we are all of these things. Okay, so what it does is rather than focusing our attention on each individual one of these, which the polysyndeton would have done, being an ausendeton, it's just a list, okay, which tells us what these things are, with the emphasis being on the thing that follows the list. Okay, hope that makes sense. We've had polysyndeton many times before and kind of gone through this explanation, so I think you guys understand what I'm saying. Okay. See, when you're like, if you're telling kids an instruction, okay, and you said, I want you to dust and mop and, and vacuum and do the dishes so that we have a clean house. Well, the focus is on the activities. I want you to mop, underline, and dust, underline, and do the dishes, underline, okay? They're forcing the kid to stop and think about, okay, I better write all these tasks down. I better make sure I don't miss one, right? Because in my household, actions have consequences, or lack of actions have consequences. Okay, but if mom said, "I want you to mop, dust, do the dishes, and everything," and whatever else I said, a mop. I didn't write it down. Mop, do the dishes, and whatever else, so that we have a clean house. The idea would have been the focus on having the clean house. The idea would have been, I've got this list of things I want you to do, but the focus is on having the clean house. So it's where the focus goes, whether you have a polysyndeton or ausendeton. Okay, that horse is dead. I beat it to death. Okay, so we have a holy nation. This starts with the neuter nominative singular of the adjective that we have seen many, many times, hagios. Hagios. That's not that real tall guy in Harry Potter. Hagios means to be set apart or holy. Okay, it means to be set apart to God, and that's what holy means. And so I give us holy. You got to be careful. Remember, as a Christian, you need to understand what your terms mean. When someone says, well, what does holy mean? Holy means to be set apart, to God. It's not just a religious term that means, I don't know, spiritual. Woo, it means I have a halo. That isn't what it means, okay? We're set apart. And it's followed, this adjective, of course, is followed by the neuter nominative, again, a neuter nominative, singular, of the noun ethnos. Looks pretty familiar. It is the root of our word, ethnic. Ethnos, E-T-H-N-O-S, ethnos. And this is another one of those words that's a synonym, okay? When we had race, we had a group of people. Well, here, ethnos means a body of persons or a group of people. Here, though, the idea is, yes, they can be united by kinship, but they're united by culture and common tradition. Here it means a nation or a people. And it is the largest unit used in Greek into which people of the world are divided on the basis of their socio-political community. It's given to us by Freeburg. Again, this is distinct from genos above because these people do not have to be united by blood. They don't have to be a physical race. They just have to be a nation. We're united. We're supposed to be the United States, for example. We're supposed to be a nation. We're a federal nation that's put together by states that are united in a governmental and cultural perspective. Har, har, har. What's happened? We have allowed people to maintain their own cultures and not assimilate. We have refused to accept the principle of immigration, where people have to learn what the United States means, how the United States was formed, the basic history of the United States, the culture of the United States, the type of government that we have that separates them from the government of the country from which they came, that was oppressing them. The language that we have in the English language itself, we've thrown all that out the door, and we've embraced multiculturalism. What happens when you start embracing multiculturalism as the precept for your nation, as the main function of your nation? You destroy your nation. The concept of a nation is something that's constituted by a socio-political, cultural community. Okay? Off the soapbox. Okay? So this is the nation, and of course emphasizes our responsibility to be part of a nation. We are Christian. We belong to God's kingdom. We are in his nation. And of course also we are, as functioning ambassadors in his nation, we are also the salt of the earth. We are the pivot for the client nation. But we are set apart to God as believers. We are a holy nation. And then after the comma, we have a comma because we have a comma in Greek. After the comma, we have a phrase that is going to be different than almost everything you see, or it will be different than everything you've seen in your corrected translations, except perhaps the King James, if you know what the King James actually means with the word that it uses. But anyway, we have a people in God's protection slant possession, comma. And God here is in parents with a single line through it as an ellipsis. Then I won't lie, this phrase took quite a bit to ferret out. What you have in the corrected translations, or not corrected, excuse me, in the general translators, says, but you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation. Very, there we are. We got that. A people for God's own possession. And that isn't really what it says here. It's close, okay? But the fact is we have a protection concept in there. A people in God's protection, slant possession, okay? In there, King James, it says a peculiar people. And the Old English for peculiar was protected, okay? You were protected by the king, okay? So we start here. In this case, it's not neuter, it's a masculine. See, that tells us that we're talking about God now. Okay, that's where we get the God's idea. We start here with the masculine nominative singular of the noun Laos. Looks like Laos if you're in my generation with the Vietnam War, but it's Laos. And it's people in a general sense. So it's another one of those synonyms. We've had race, nation, people. It's used predominantly in the Bible to indicate people of God, people of Israel, a group of people that are following a particular religious, okay, or moral standard. I shouldn't say religious, a particular standard, Christianity in our case. Okay? So we have a people. Next, we have a preposition. The preposition we have is ice plus the accusative. EIS, ice plus the accusative. And ice in its basic form means in, into, to, or toward. It can mean among, as in among a group. Okay. It doesn't necessarily become for, like we have here, a people for God's own possession. Okay, we have essentially a people in. And if we don't say in God's possession per se, what do we have? Okay, this is where I had to do some digging. Okay, so we have in, and here we have the idea of inside the sphere of. Okay, we have the feminine accusative singular of the noun peripoiesis. Peripoiesis. That's P-E-R-I-P-O-I, long E, S-I-S. Peripoiesis. And literally, okay, etymologically, okay, we have the word peri, meaning around or about, and then we have the word poiesis, the verb. And poiesis means to be doing or to be working, okay? And so peripoiesis means to be working around. And actually what this came to mean was to be putting a wall around something, or doing something by putting something around, doing around, working around a particular point in the center, as so to protect what's in the center. A while to ferret out and go through the different references and follow the word from the ancient Homeric Greek all the way through, okay? Because what's happened is, because the translators have said, okay, that it just means to become a possession, okay, they got rid of the original intent of protection. Because the translators say that, what's happened is almost all of the lexicons have turned to saying, oh, well, it must mean that. And that's one of those cases where you have something backwards, where instead of having the word defined by what it actually means, it's defined by what people think it means. Okay? And so because down through time it's been used to mean possession, or with the connotation of possession, okay, the definition became possession. But the actual definition from its very basic roots means the protection piece. And you protect it so that it becomes yours. You protect it so that you can keep it. The idea being that I'm going to surround this, okay, I'm going to protect it and I'm going to make it mine. Like the little kid in daycare that has the particular toy that he wants to play with, and so he takes the toy and then he takes all the blocks and he puts the blocks and builds himself a little circle of blocks so none of the other kids can come in the circle and take his toy. Okay, that's exactly what we have. He's protecting it, but why? He's protecting it because he wants to possess it. So the connotation, the concept of protection is drastically missing, okay, in this. And it doesn't sound like much, but it's important. Obviously, it's important. That's what the God, the Holy Spirit, used through Peter. And it took me a while to dig that out, because as I was doing my study, it was, anyway, I won't bore you with the details, but it was an interesting word study. I haven't had to do a word study like that in a while, and it led to a kind of late night. So, wow, poor me. Anyway, peripoiesis means to be protected, and then it becomes to mean possessed, possessing, or possession. To save something, to keep something protected. And here, the idea is that we have the elliptical adjective that tells us what kind of protection, and it's God's protection. That comes from the masculine part of that. Okay, and remember these other predicate nominatives were all feminine, right? And this one flipped to the masculine. It flipped to the masculine because we're talking about God. So a people in God's protection / possession. Now, as I stated, we've got these four things, okay? They've been listed, bing, 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 as a list, and the idea being that the emphasis is on what comes after the list, okay? So this next phrase is really kind of where the focus is, and that's what comes after the list. And what comes after the list is, so that you might proclaim the virtues / excellencies of him. And This verse was actually fairly well translated, to be honest with you, in the general translators. You get the general idea. And so, but I'm making a point of the small differences. And I could have been done in about 6 or 7 hours earlier than I was by simply going with what the general translators have. But it's important. My job is to make sure that you understand and you get every little bit that we squeeze out what we can out of this, right? So anyway, here we start with conjunction, and the conjunction is hopos. H-O-P-O-S, hopos. And hopos is a relative adverb that introduces indefinite, and it means indefiniteness, and it means how, in what way, or by what means. And we see it used that way also in Matthew 22:15 and Luke 24:20. Okay? And so it doesn't just mean in order that. For in order that, that's what? That's hina. That's what we usually have as hina. Okay? Here, it's not just in order that, it's so that. Okay? Emphasizing the fact that. Okay? So we have so that. Next, we have an aorist active subjunctive, second person plural. And, oh, I'm sorry, excuse me. Yes. Okay, aorist active subjunctive, second person plural of the verb exongelo. Exongelo. I got to get the accent on the right syllable. Exongelo. That's E-K-Z. That's the X sound. That's what gives you with this. Okay. And then, of course, the gamma gamma. The GG, okay, is transliterated in the English with the NG sound, just like we have for angelos, right? So we have exongelo. E-K-Z, A-N-G-E-L-L, and I should have made that a long O. Exongelo, okay? And exongelo is a compound word. It comes from ex, meaning, or ek, meaning out from. And then we actually have engelete, which means to tell. So together we have tell out from, to declare abroad, or to proclaim. And with the second person, okay. Second person plural, it means you or you all. And as a subjunctive, it gives us the concept of potential. So we have so that you might proclaim. Again, meaning you have the ability to do this proclamation. You have the ability to be an ambassador. Whether you do it or not is dependent on your use of your volition. So that you might proclaim. And then we have the content of the proclamation. This is the feminine accusative plural of an articular noun. And it's an articular noun that a couple people in this room might know. It's arete. A-R-E-T long E. Arete. And arete, in the Homeric Greek and others, is a term denoting consummate excellence or merit within a social context. It means uncommon character, worthy of praise. It means excellence of character, exceptional civic virtue, uprightness, goodness. Alyssa and I went to Libby's swim meet yesterday, and we saw a lot of those words on the back of the T-shirt for her school. The school's name is Arete, okay? Which, of course, the people that make the announcement can never pronounce, right? Arete, yeah, whatever. They're starting to get it now after a couple of years, but anyway, Arete, okay? Uprightness or goodness. Here we understand this to be rolled into the word virtue. Biblically, it's virtue. And excellence, and we have it in the plural, so we have virtues and excellencies to give us the whole rounded concept. This is a very pregnant word. Okay, and that's the reason they named the school that is to try and instill those kinds of virtues in the kids that are going to that school. Okay, as a preparatory academy. Anyway, so that you might proclaim the virtues / excellencies. And excellencies takes that whole rounded category of everything associated with excellence in civic duty, excellence in moral duty, excellence in all of the different duties. That's why we have it, and it's in the plural, excellencies. This then ends with the masculine genitive singular of the definite article, ha, meaning him, in this case, in the masculine, him, and in the genitive, we, of course, have of him, so that you might proclaim the virtues and excellencies of him. So that's the piece that has the subtle emphasis on it by the fact that we rip through those four categories. But Peter's not done with us yet. We have comma here. And then we have the one, and this is in parens with a single line through it. It's elliptical. The one, having called you out of darkness. And this is supposed to look like that. Be underlined. The one having called you out of darkness. And out of darkness is underlined. And so we skip the emphatic phrase. The out of darkness that you're going to see is emphatic because it's due to hyperbation. It's been brought to the front to emphasize it. Okay, so that's called hyperbaton. Instead, we start with the aorist active participle, genitive masculine singular of the verb kaleo. Kaleo, K-A-L-E, long O, kaleo. We've seen this word many times. And kaleo means to name or to call. And it has the idea of to call alongside for encouragement, to call alongside for protection. All of those are pertinent here. Okay? Participial form, I wanted to keep it in that form, keep it in kind of the gerund form, so I included the parenthetical, the one, okay, referring back to God, who was in the genitive, and we have this as a genitive. Okay, so we have the one having called, referring back to God. Okay, the of him. The one having called. Then we have the emphatic, excuse me, not the emphatic. Then we have the accusative plural of the second person personal pronoun su. You or you all. The one having called you all. And then we go back to the emphatic phrase, which starts with the preposition ek, which we just saw, plus the genitive, meaning out from, plus the neuter genitive singular of skatos, S-K-O-T-O-S. And skatos means darkness, means gloom. Literally, actually, the first use of it means the darkness in the depths of the sea. See, when you go down into the deep, deep part of the sea, it's pitch black. There is no light that gets down there. It's like going into a mine. If you've never had the opportunity to go to Goldfield, I don't know if they still do it out here. When the kids were young, we went to Goldfield, and they have this mine tour. Ha ha ha. They don't really take you down into a mine. They just take you, yeah, and they just make it feel like you're going down into a mine. It's not actually very deep, but it doesn't have to be. You get into this mine shaft, okay, and it is pitch black. You could stay there till the cows come home, and your eyes are not going to adjust to that blackness. It is that dark. There is absolutely zero light in there. Okay? And that's what we have here. We have the darkness. Well, that's what it literally means. But of course, figuratively, this darkness means spiritual death. This darkness means the spiritual death that we have as being dark, as unbelievers. Okay? So he called us out of the darkness of spiritual death, or being an unbeliever, spiritually dead. Okay? And that's underlined because Peter is putting this juxtaposition, right, between believers and unbelievers. And so he's pointing back at those guys he just talked about, those believers he just talked about. I guess that's forward to you guys. I should point that way. He's pointing back, okay, to those unbelievers who are in darkness. That kind of brings home the idea of the stumbling, right? I don't know if you've ever woken up in the middle of the night and it's dark and you hear something going on outside and you try to go, stumble through your room, and unless you have a really, really good sense of everything that's in your house, okay, you can stumble very easily. We now have a separate assortment of dog toys that we didn't used to have. Okay, and I have found myself at night, stepping on one or two and saying, things I probably shouldn't say. But the idea is, when it's dark, you don't see anything, and that's what happens when you're a believer. You stumble and you don't see anything. Okay, so having called you out of darkness, and then finally we have into his marvelous light, semicolon. Into his marvelous light. Here we have ice again, plus the accusative. Ice plus the accusative means into. Then we have the form of unemphatic possession, just the natural form of the Greek possession. We start off with a neuter accusative singular of the adjective thumastos. Thumastos. Thumastos, if you want to do it that way. Thaumastos. This means wonderful, marvelous, beyond human comprehension, etc. Then this is followed by the neuter accusative singular of the articular noun phos. 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 And phos means light. The root of our word photon, which is a particle of light. See, one of the things you learn in physics, if you've ever taken physics in high school, if you haven't, if you have kids and they take it, one of the things they learn, okay, about light is it's one of those, mysteries of the universe. When you observe it one way, it's a wave. When you observe it another way, it's a particle. Okay, well, the particle of light we call a photon. Okay, we also have, obviously, photograph. And if you think of photograph, what photograph is equivalent to, in the Greek, to light writing. We have graphe, writing. So you have light plus writing. So it's light writing. Okay? And photosynthesis and all those other things, using light to make stuff, right? Okay, so we have photons, so we have light. So far we have into the light. And then we have the masculine genitive singular of the pronoun autos. Oops. Not that. Autos. Autos meaning here in the masculine, meaning him, and in the genitive, meaning of him. And so altogether we have the marvelous light of him, or we have his marvelous light. Okay, that's just the way they do the possessive, right? We've seen that many times. And here in the Greek, we end with a semicolon. And so in the English, we're going to end with a semicolon. And so the thought is going to go on. The sense is going to go. The thought ends here, but the sense is going to go on in verse 10. But we now have verse 9 all together. And all together, we have, and that's what's underlined, right? As long as I'm correcting it, let's get it right. We have, but you are a chosen, slant elect race, comma, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people in God's protection, slant possession, so that you might proclaim the virtues, slant excellencies of him, the one having called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Semicolon. Okay. What a wonderful promise that we have. All of these things are lined up so that we're called out of that darkness. We're demanded to come out of the darkness, to walk out of that darkness into the light. And God's always there, calling individuals, calling unbelievers, okay? Calling them, come out of the darkness, come into the light. See the rest of the world, okay? And the whole concept of light. I love the way the Bible uses the whole concept of light, right? You can't see the marvels of nature without the light. You take a cloudy night, because I'm going to get rid of the marvels of the stars, right? You take a cloudy night, okay, and you're out in the dark on a cloudy night, and you can't see anything in a forest, right? You stumble around. But what happens when it's light? When it's light, like when we were up in the Grand Canyon, when it's light, you see all the wonderful marvels. But it takes the light to see that, to get the colors of the rocks, to get the colors of the trees and the deep blues of the sky, along with the puffy whiteness of the clouds. All of that takes light. Well, it's just like what we have to have as spiritual creatures. We got to be out of being spiritually dead and be spiritually alive so that we can have all these wonderful blessings and we can see all of these wonderful things. Okay? That's the marvelous light. Okay? So, we got point 9. Let's get an analysis. We can get started on it and make a run for it. Point 1. Verse 9 moves us from discussions of the unbeliever back to the discussion of the properly functioning believer. Peter gave us the concept of the unbeliever that he could contrast us with him and focus us on what we as believers are supposed to be. Thus, the idea of our first phrase, comma, but you, comma, could really be thought of as, quote, but you and only you as believers, dot, 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 end quote. Peter keeps mixing it up to keep these individuals, their interest going, and he keeps bringing back and forth, doing the switching back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, keeping them focused so that they have to track what's going on, okay? It's a little bit warm in here. Do I need to make it even cooler yet? Probably not going to do much for the next 15 minutes, but I look out and everybody's kind of going. It was a good apple spice cake with all the sugar. Okay, point 2. Next, we see 4 descriptions of us as believers. These 4 descriptions are a result of our salvation, and are our true status, so they, quote, positionally, end quote, describe us. But we are to understand that we are to function with respect to this status and therefore confirm that they are our experiential, quote, experiential, end quote, status as well. You know, if you said to the general populace, and it used to be that this was said, you know, in movies and stuff, and people understand it, the phrase, "You're a man, now act like one," right? You probably heard that phrase. That used to be the thing that was said. You know, young ladies have heard the other side of that phrase. "You're a lady, now act like one," right? Meaning, show your manners. Sit down with your legs crossed, okay, and your hands in your lap, type of thing. Don't speak the language of the sailor aboard ship, okay. Don't you know? Don't go around you know with BO and all those kinds of things that men are known to do. You're supposed to be a lady, an example to the men. You're a lady, be one. You're a man, act like one. Well, what this is telling us you have these four things. You're chosen. You're, you know, you're elect. You're royal. You're, you know, the four topics. Now act that way. That's why they're being brought up this way. Peter's saying, here's your status, act that way. And how's the most important way that you can act it? You act it, as we see towards the end, by proclaiming his excellencies. We do that through our everyday function, not just who we are. People don't know that you're a believer just by looking at you. They can't tell your status as a believer unless you're acting like one. Then they see you acting with that royalty, acting with that proper function, acting as a chosen individual, acting with honor, acting with his excellencies, acting with virtue. That's how you proclaim it. See, the old phrase, do as I say, not as I do, doesn't work here. The idea is do as I do. That's how I proclaim. Okay? So the idea is Peter gives us these four statuses. There are truly our status. And so positionally we're there, but we're supposed to be experientially there as well. We're supposed to act in those statuses. Anyway, status. Okay. Subpoint A. Oops, no, wait. Okay, point 3. There is no subpoints under here. Point 3. I rolled my words up past the actual point. Point 3. We start off whoops, didn't mean to turn it off. Meant to turn. There we go. Whoops, wrong way. Now people are getting cold. Okay, so subpoint 3. We start off with the description that we are a chosen slant elect race. Subpoint A. Oops. In PowerPoint, when you press up arrow, it only goes up one bullet. It doesn't go up to the whole top of the slide. Anyway, subpoint A. As church-age believers, we have been chosen or elected by God. We are elected to honor God and recognize and give Him the, quote, precious value, end quote, expressed in verse 7. Our election puts us in the believer's side of the divine decree, but our actions and worship towards Him are what demonstrates that we are His and that we are a new or chosen race. Isaiah 43:20 and Deuteronomy 10:15. Sure. Isaiah 43:20, Deuteronomy 10:15. Point B. We are a new race by virtue of being in union with Him. Nowhere in the preceding dispensations are believers put into union with Christ and become royal members of His family, and hence a, quote, race, end quote, associated with Him. When God the Father looks at us, He no longer sees us as being part of Adam. Okay, He sees us being part of Christ. He sees us being in union with Christ. He sees a brand new race. We changed races, if you will. Okay, we are no longer that which has the darkness associated with it, as we see obviously, but the light. And so we are no longer in union with Adam. We're in union with Christ, and that's what God sees when He looks at us. He sees Christ. We are a new race. Okay, in the Old Testament, okay, and with Adam, Adam actually became a new race because his genes were changed. Okay, he became a Semitic, one who crossed over. Okay, and so his genes were changed, and he became the father of the Jewish race. Okay, but we're not part of the Jewish race. We're part of the Christian race, if you will. We are part of Christ. Okay? It isn't our physical race that matters. It is our spiritual race that matters. We've moved out of Adam's race and into Christ's race. So we are a new race. Okay, this is where we're going to go ahead and stop. We're ready for point 4. And point 4 obviously is going to be the royal priesthood. What you can do if you want is study the Levitical priesthood, and you'll understand the difference between this and the Levitical priesthood, because there was no royalty at all in the Levitical priesthood. They came from Aaron, and Aaron was not part of royalty. Okay, we're going to go ahead now then and close the class with a song.